What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the gray area with your host, ItsThatKidGreg. In this video, I want to talk about the news media. You know, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Foxes, the TYTs, and how I think all of them have become absolutely awful in the past few years. Let's get started. So this video is in part a follow-up to my TYC Sucks rant, which was also, that video in itself was a follow-up to my guns video. I'll put them here, and of course links will be in the description if you want to check those out first. In the TYT rant video, I talked about the Orlando shooter, who I refuse to name on this channel because, again, he doesn't deserve that type of attention. And in that video, I mentioned how it was unfair of the Young Turks to say that, oh, well, his hatred, that this person who was supposedly a closeted homosexual who did this horrible act out of not just hatred for gay people, but hatred for himself in a way. And I said how that was unfair. It was unfair of the Young Turks to put the responsibility of that onto American culture, because we in American culture are much more open and accepting of gay people than the Islamic Muslim culture that he was raised in. Well, in news, the FBI has actually found no evidence of him being closeted gay at all. They found no Grindr app on his phone, no text messages, no secret porn stash of any type. The only thing that they know about this guy is his family, his religion, and that he called 911 and claimed that he was acting on behalf of ISIS. Now, while that doesn't change the point that I made in my last video, it does highlight the point I want to make in this video. The news is no longer news, it's entertainment. Now, naturally, most of us want to trust the news. It gives us the current events both locally and nationally, and hell, even internationally if you watch it worldly. But this idea that the shooter was actually secretly a gay man, it was picked up by the news media from unverified sources and passed around like fact. It probably duped a lot of people, including myself, because I spoke about it in my TYT Sucks video. Now, to me, the news is supposed to be about objective fact and bringing people to truth however clearly that you can. But obviously, to the news media, it was more important to weave an enticing story than to actually tell what was really going on. I mean, plot twist of the century: man who shoots up gay nightclub just happens to be gay. It is a good tale, it's a good drama, and it brings in the viewers and it brings in people clicking onto your site. So obviously they were just gonna run with it. Now, I understand that news media outlets require views and clicks to make money so that they can stay afloat and keep doing what they're doing, but that doesn't mean that you have to be unethical about it. You can look into things. You can say allegedly. You can say presumably. You can use these words to let people know that this may or may not be true, but this is the idea on the table right now. But instead, they take things like this and they put it everywhere and tell people, yes, this is the truth. This is 100% fact, and there's no way that you can say otherwise. And if facts come out that it's otherwise, we won't apologize.
It's bullshit!
I mean, let's take a big event for example. Let's look at Gamergate. Gamergate happened when gamers were upset that games journalists from multiple different outlets were collaborating with each other and devs, the people who make video games, in order to serve their own agendas and needs. For example, the initial speculation was that a indie dev was sleeping with several, or having a sexual relationship with several games journalists who all just so happened to give her game positive reviews. Now, when gamers called out these journalists on these facts, Rather than own up to what they did or admit that there may be some wrongdoing, instead they painted gamers as violent, angry misogynists who just don't want women to be involved with video games. Entirely shifting the goalposts on what the conversation was actually about. And the news media, the general news media, picked up on it like that. They just ran with this. They didn't interview any gamers. They didn't interview any people who were heading the Gamergate movement at the time. No. They just stuck to the few women who put themselves at the forefront of this. And they just played the victim narrative over and over and over and over until they forgot about it. It even got to the point where a Law and Order episode was made about the subject, where gamers were painted as violent domestic terrorists who couldn't tell the fiction of a video game from objective reality. Crazy, right? Now when the news over sensationalizes things like this that aren't necessarily as big as they appear, or they aren't as bad as they make it seem, there's a couple of root causes of this. But I mainly want to blame the 24-hour news cycle. Let's be real. There's only so much news that can happen all day, every day. So what do? They take a story, they spice it up and embellish a little bit, and they post it everywhere for everyone to see as much as they can to get in as much viewers as they can. Until, of course, that story is replaced with something more interesting or something that's new and shinier and everybody's interested in this now. And so they quietly make that old story that they propped up on a pedestal as the biggest thing to ever happen and push it off to the side. And then this new story is put on the pedestal as the biggest thing to ever happen. And that's why you see people in this country, whenever there's a tragedy or whenever there's something huge and important going on in the news, it seems like in 2 weeks they just forget about it. Because they did. Because they're watching the TV. The TV is telling them what's important right now, and that thing that was important last week is no longer on the screen. Instead, it's this new thing. It's Kim Kardashian's new, her new plastic surgery, or Donald Trump's hair fell off. Some dumbness. So sensationalism alone is pretty bad. But what happens when you combine this with political bias? I'll tell you what happens. You get Fox News and TYT. Now don't get it twisted. These two organizations are exactly the same. And the only difference between them is where they fall on the political spectrum. With Fox News being way over here to the right and TYT being way over here to the left. Now both TYT and Fox are willing to bend facts, insert their own opinion into these twisted facts, and present them as if this is the objective truth. All of which is done to push a political agenda that they themselves believe in. Now as I mentioned previously, I personally believe that news should be as close to objective truth as possible. However, neither of these groups fact checks or looks at their sources to see if they're credible or not. And God forbid that they pull a retraction in the cases where it turns out that their source was wrong or that they were misinformed in some type of way. Now don't misunderstand me. The other major news outlets, MSNBC, CNN, they're all guilty of this too. But the reason why I picked out the Young Turks and Fox News is because of how infamous they are for putting their political bias above the facts. Now there's nothing wrong with political commentary leaning to one side or the other side of the spectrum. But trying to dress up commentary and opinions as fact is intellectually dishonest, and honestly, it's really harmful to the majority of people that watch the shows. There are plenty of people who could have benefited from more of an objective standpoint when it comes to watching the news. Here are two examples of that. Like, there are plenty of radical Islamists who watch stuff like Fox, who say that Muslims are evil, Muslims are awful, that they shouldn't be allowed to come into the country, and that gets them riled up and mad, and a person who normally wouldn't go to the extremes of radicalism is suddenly feels justified in their actions. Meanwhile, on the flip side of the spectrum, the Young Turks might say something like, oh, well, you know, you can't blame this or that. Obviously, the problem is not the culture that these people are raised in. The problem is America, because America's terrible. America's done everything, and Christians are terrible, and Christians did everything wrong first. And so a moderate who may have been the one to step up and say, hey, you know, look, like these terrorist attacks, they need to stop. We need to reform. We need to fix this. We need to come amongst ourselves and figure out what we can do to end all this needless bloodshed. And instead they step down because the Young Turks have said, oh no, it's not our fault. No, it's America. America's terrible. Flip America. We don't care about America. Bah! Now, critical thinking is something that's been severely lacking in the past couple generations of the United States. And the way that the news media has been slowly playing the way it's been with people, we've had less and less critical thinkers pop up. And to me, without a news media that is able to present nuance and present things in such a way where people actually have to sit there and think about what they're watching and make an informed decision, without them doing that, all we have left is ignorant people who think that they know what's better for everyone else than they do themselves. And that's not good. People should have the right to make decisions. People should have the opportunity to be presented objective facts and make their own choices. Because as long as people remain ignorant, the status quo remains intact. And no one moves up, and everything stays the same. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'd like to thank you for watching, and remember, nothing is black and white.